Well, that last video nearly killed me. Hopefully this one's shorter though. We're jumping right back into Road to Ragnarok. Hello and welcome back to Road to Ragnarok, the mini-series where I tackle every single God of War game in order of what console they're on. Last time I talked about the original hack-and-slash classic, God of War 2005. A game full of engaging combat, brain-teasing puzzles, amazing art direction, and a simple but effective and powerful story. Kratos, the ghost of Sparta, embarked on a perilous mission no man has ever returned from, retrieving Pandora's box from a deadly labyrinth. All Kratos wanted was to get rid of the night terrors that remind him of his past actions, and he never sought for anything more. But opening the box to kill Ares promoted Kratos to the new God of War. Until he wasn't. Like I said, God of War was a pretty good game, and it was deservingly praised by critics and gamers alike. The game sold 1 million units by 2006, so of course Sony Santa Monica felt it only logical to start working on a sequel. Our old friend David Jaffe stepped down as game director this time around, with Cory Balrog taking his place. You know, nowadays people consider Cory Balrog the father of God of War more so than Jaffe, since Balrog's been involved with every God of War game except for Ascension. Or, you know, people don't consider that at all, and maybe it's just me. Can you tell I can't stand David Jaffe? Anyway, for this sequel, the goal was to continue where the first game's story left off while expanding upon the formula, as well as just being more badass and generally a better experience than the first one. When it was released on the PS2 in 2007, people were blown away, cementing this game's status as a classic and a perfect successor to a perfect game. Now, it's probably a little too early for me to say, but I personally think that saying they succeeded would be a huge understatement because this game is incredible. But as usual, the only way to elaborate is to jump into the game, so here's God of War 2. We start with Kratos as the new God of War. Since Kratos is Spartan, you can imagine that Sparta may have been a little advantaged when it came to winning wars. Athena warns Kratos that the more cities he destroys, the more angry the gods get. Kratos refuses to listen, falls into battle, and is shrunken down to normal size by Athena. At least that's what Kratos thinks.
Athena! You conspire against me!
Immediately we get an opening that blows the first game's Hydra section completely out of the water.
Pun entirely intended.
Getting back into the gameplay loop of combat, earning red orbs, and puzzles with pushable blocks and shit is pretty easy this time around. I noticed some animations are improved from the first game, and the art direction is once again really good. Before I talk more on the gameplay, let's finish the opening section. Hey, look, another sex mini game. So in the opening cutscene, the Colossus of Rhodes is brought to life as it starts rampaging across the city. The goal of the opening is to take it down, and this is a pretty creative way to adapt the destruction of the real world Colossus of Rhodes during the earthquake in 226 BC. Yes, it's real, look it up. The Colossus of Rhodes is what makes the opening so special. Throughout the level, we get a lot of close encounters with the beast. Eventually, Zeus tells Kratos to Eventually, Zeus tells Kratos to retrieve the Blade of Olympus, the same blade that ended the Great War of Gods and Titans. Draining Kratos' godly powers into the blade would give him the strength to slay the statue. After getting the blade and getting rid of all your abilities, we actually get to go inside the Colossus and use the blade to destroy the foundation. The mix of platforming and light puzzling here makes for an interesting finisher before we jump out of the Colossus's mouth and see it fall to its destruction. Afterward, Kratos does something extremely funny.
Do you see, gods of Olympus? Do you need more proof than this?
So now Kratos has been Metroidvania'd. He's severely injured and his only hope of survival is in front of him. After he limps a little bit forward, Zeus reveals himself, and he's also the little bird that's been flying around in this level. He doesn't want what happened to Ares to happen to himself, so he ordered Kratos to pledge his allegiance to the gods. Of course, if you remember anything from the last game, the gods are petty monsters who don't care for any mortals, and they've been using Kratos for 10 years. So understandably, Kratos would rather die, so Zeus kills him.
It did not have to be this way, my son. This path is of your choosing. A choice from the gods is as useless as the gods themselves.
After Zeus ends the battle with a slash from his blade, Kratos gets a vision from the Titan of Earth, Gaia. Gaia forms an allegiance with Kratos in order to put an end to Zeus's tyranny, and Kratos climbs out of the underworld. Let's talk about the game. Okay, never mind. I guess we're flying now. Okay, once we land, we're finally in control. Just like everything else, the gameplay is basically the same thing from the first game, but better. The combat is the same old routine involving the monsters you have to beat with your weapons and magic, but it feels a little more balanced and fluid this time around. Every so often, QTEs will return when it comes to defeating bigger enemies like minotaurs and boss fights. God of War 2's abilities are pretty much the same as the first abilities, albeit with a different name like the Rage of the Titans or Typhon's Bane. There's some new ones thrown into the mix, but we'll get to that later. For now, let's talk about the main character. Not Kratos, Zeus. Zeus's story and overall motivation in this game is a neat way to hold the story together. This game really delves into just how fucked up the gods are, like when Kratos meets Prometheus, aka one of the many examples as to why Zeus is a big asshole. All Prometheus did was bring humanity the gift of fire, and in return Zeus chained him to a rock for an eagle to pick at his liver every day just for it to be regenerated at night. That's kind of fucked up! Another interesting thing is how Zeus's actions at the beginning of the game tie into his backstory. Anyone who knows basic Greek mythology knows that the leader of the Titans, Kronos, feared that one of his children would overthrow him, so he ate them. Of course, Zeus was the only one to not get eaten, so he was nurtured by Gaia until he was old enough to free his siblings and overthrow the Titans. Just like his father, Zeus didn't want to be overthrown, especially since Kratos already killed a god before. All of this comes into play when we get to the twist at the end, so we'll pick this discussion back up later. After we kill Theseus, we're at the Steeds of Time, a gift by Kronos to the Sisters of Fate in an attempt for him to not get overthrown, and we all know how that turned out. Speaking of Theseus, this game introduces something the first game was severely lacking in: boss fights. Since the sisters have the ability to control time itself, you can imagine that some people would want that power for themselves. That and I guess mindless beasts that get in Kratos' way. The bosses urge you to keep your distance while dishing out attacks, and they're all unique in their own way. I already mentioned Theseus, but there's also the undead barbarian who Kratos fought immediately before making the deal with Ares, featuring the best character in fiction, the boat captain. This guy's running joke is the funniest thing to ever be put on screen. Zeus, Atreus, Kratos, fuck all those guys. The best character is the boat captain from God of War 2005, baby. He's never seen again after this game. What was I talking about again? Oh yeah, the bosses. Just to name a couple more, there's also Medusa's sister, who I'm probably not allowed to show on YouTube, and this stupid ass dog that won't stop giving me a hard time for literally no reason at all, and every time I fight him I just want to gouge his eyes out because it makes me so fucking mad. But when we beat him, we get the Golden Fleece, which is essentially a perfect parry mixed with a short button prompt you have to press in order to deflect attacks like the Gorgon Rays. Well, I think that's a good enough segue to talk about the new abilities. Just like in God of War 1, you can switch to a different weapon, one that deals more damage at the cost of being much slower. But instead of a cool sword, it's the giant sledgehammer we get from killing the barbarian, and I don't know. I'm not really a fan of this thing. The blades are quicker and fun to use, and the hammer just leaves me open to attacks more often than not. Also later we get a spear that's also pretty much entirely useless as well. But entirely new to this game is the amulet that slows down time in certain instances to solve a few puzzles. Honestly, this idea holds some potential, and it's a shame that they got rid of some of these abilities in the next game. Oh. Spoilers, I guess. I think you probably noticed by now that the presentation is still top notch. For 2007, this game has aged very well. Even the quality of the CGI cutscenes is a lot better. As much as I love the first game, one complaint I have is the amount of time spent in Pandora's Temple. Don't get me wrong, it's an intricate labyrinth full of unique puzzles, but I wish we would have gotten to explore more aspects of this world. God of War 2, on the other hand, fixes this by making the adventure feel much more grand. The Island of Creation is a much more, well, creative setting for this game. You explore a wide variety of ruins and death traps on your quest to see the sisters. We also get to see more of the Greek world, encountering characters like the aforementioned Theseus, as well as Icarus, Perseus, and Atlas. We're almost at our destination, so let's go back to talking about the story. On his way to seek an audience with the sisters, Kratos meets Icarus. After a scripted sequence where the two of them fall out of the planet while Kratos rips off Icarus's wings, we're down in Atlas's domain. I love how it looks similar to the underworld from the first game, considering how low we are right now. They imply that Atlas and Kratos have met before, probably in one of these two games. I literally know nothing about them except for the fact that Kratos has a brother and one of them has the child abandonment QTE. Back to the story, it's kind of funny that Atlas is one of the few characters that Kratos actually tries to reason with, and it actually works.
Why would I ever trust a servant of Zeus? Because I seek to destroy Zeus!
Oh, okay.
After a small conversation, Atlas gives a new spell and helps us cross the cavern to finally make it to the Temple of the Fates. This portion is kind of reminiscent of Pandora's Temple, since Kratos is closer to his destination than ever before, and it's a big gauntlet of puzzles using your knowledge of the game. Why does Kratos hate Papyrus so much? What the fuck? Okay, we're nearing the end game and some super interesting things happen now. This one Spartan warrior who was still loyal to Kratos even after the beginning of the game also happens to be in this temple. Of course, Kratos fights him in a dark room before discovering it's him. We learn that after Kratos died, Zeus destroyed Kratos' hometown of Sparta. I already discussed how this game really leans in on how shitty Zeus is, and this is just the ultimate petty act that really cements Kratos' goal of killing him and preventing the destruction of Sparta. But before that, Kratos gives out one of the most iconic line deliveries in gaming while he fails to look behind him at something really loud. Again.
Zeus! Is this how you face me, coward? I am through doing the bidding of the gods! Come down here and face me now, Zeus!
When the Kraken grabs Kratos, Gaia somehow sends him a vision where she takes the form of his deceased wife. Gaia gives Kratos the last bit of strength before we blast out of the Kraken's grasp to fight it. Am I stupid for not figuring out sooner that you're supposed to climb on these tentacles? Maybe. After the Kraken gets impaled, Kratos takes a phoenix ride all the way to the top of the temple. After all this time, we finally meet the sisters. By now we all know Kratos isn't the best at negotiating, so this boss fight is really cool. Using the fleece to counter attacks is a vital skill for this boss, as well as the grappling mechanic to quickly avoid the floor. My mind was blown when Kratos got sucked into a portal and ended up fighting in the climax of the first game. You have to make sure the sword doesn't break so Kratos from the first game can use it to defeat Ares. After defeating Lachesis and Atropos, we see some pretty interesting foreshadowing for future entries before making it down to Clotho, the spinner of the threads of life. I really dig her design. It's massive, grotesque, and she's covered in boobies! She kind of looks spider-like in a way, you know, since she has multiple arms, pale skin, and constantly weaves threads that look like spider webs. Anyway, Clotho is another boss for us to fight, but the fight is structured more so as a puzzle, and it was legit a brain scratcher. Hey, wait a minute, since Clotho made the threads of time, how come everything was just fine after she died? After all, she did warn Kratos that he would destroy everything if he killed her.
It is through my threads that all life is born. You must you will destroy everything.
Well, my theory is that the sisters didn't necessarily invent time or anything like that, they just control the flow of it using the threads, deciding the fate for every mortal, god, and titan. After the three of them were killed by Kratos, time just kind of flowed naturally and the fate of everyone wasn't decided by the sisters anymore. So in short, the sisters are frauds and tyrants just like Zeus. And speaking of Zeus, Kratos uses the threads to go back in time to the beginning of the game and fight Zeus in order to save Sparta. This fight is pretty climactic and makes use of things you learned like attacking at a distance and parrying. I like how Zeus and Kratos were basically playing a game of tug-of-war with the Blade of Olympus. What I didn't like, however, was controlling the blade. It's another one of those weapons that aren't as fast or satisfying to use as the Blades of Chaos. But you know what, I can't really complain all too much since you're not supposed to mindlessly attack Zeus. You know, unless you're using magic. Okay, ending time. Kratos tricks Zeus by pretending to surrender, begging him to end end his life. Suddenly, we're greeted with a QTE sequence where Kratos gets the upper hand and stabs him multiple times using the blades. Suddenly, Athena shows up and sacrifices herself to save Zeus. It's at this moment that Athena reveals something big. Zeus is Kratos' father. Remember earlier when I was talking about Kronos fearing that Zeus would overthrow him? Well, it seems that Zeus is a lot like his father. Kratos then decides he's tired of living in the god's shadow and he'll do anything it takes for Zeus to die and all of Olympus with him. Kratos then returns to the Loom Chamber and goes back in time to the Great War of Gods and Titans. The gods may have been advantaged back then, but back in the present, the Titans may have a better chance at victory considering Kratos offed 2 Olympians already. Now that Zeus is weakened up on Olympus, Kratos brings the Titans, and by extension the Great War, back to the present. Kratos delivers another iconic line, and the game ends on a cliffhanger.
Zeus, your son has returned! I bring the destruction of Olympus!
So, God of War 2. I can't stress enough how much better this was compared to the first game. Maybe the story wasn't the strongest and some abilities were, in my opinion, lackluster, but the positives severely outweigh the negatives. The game has amazing art direction, memorable locations, a barbaric, epic orchestral OST, satisfying puzzles, engaging combat, intensely strong story moments, and it was just an overall blast to visit. It's one of the best games of all time and a worthy sequel to the original 2005 classic. The game may have ended, but this is just the beginning of the end. Man, what a great game. I honestly can't wait to take a look at the PSP games since I've never played them before. But before that, it's time I got back to the Sonic 3 hype train. I made a community post a while back with some of my plans for future videos, and well, before Sonic 3 comes out in December, it's about time we revisit the world of Sonic movies, Before Sonic 3 comes out in December, it's about time we revisit the world of the Sonic movies as well as the Sonic Adventure games. But before I play 2 of the best Sonic games of all time, I have to watch 2 of the most mid movies of all time. Hooray! I don't think the movies suck, but you'll just have to wait to hear my full thoughts. Goodbye!